This being the further readings of MetaHuman, author Deepak Chopra, MD. And I continue. But I will argue that becoming metahuman is an urgent necessity. It is the only way out of the illusions that play out in our lives as inner suffering, confusion, and conflict. One other way out is a cup of instant coffee, adequately heated and thoroughly enjoyed. Let's talk about the fantasy of everyday life from the book MetaHuman by Deepak Chopra, MD. Everyone would agree that it is better to live in reality than in fantasy. So it will come as a shock that you have been living in a fantasy all your life. It's an all-embracing illusion you bought into from earliest childhood. Even the most practical, hard-headed person is immersed in fantasy all the time. I don't mean flights of fancy or erotic fantasies or dreams of getting rich overnight. Nothing you perceive is as it seems. Everything is an illusion from the ground up. Take out your smartphone and look at any photo you've saved on it. The image is several inches across, whether the photo is of the Grand Canyon, a mouse, or a microbe. Your eyes are about as far apart as the screen of a smartphone. But you perceive the Grand Canyon, a mouse, and a microbe as hugely different in size. How do we automatically adjust the size of what appears on a smartphone? No one knows. And this becomes even more puzzling when you consider that the retina at the back of the eye is curved and the image projected on it is upside down. Why doesn't the world look as distorted as in a funhouse mirror? You could shrug your shoulders and ascribe the whole mystery to the brain, which massages the raw data reaching the eye and gives us a realistic picture of the world. But this only deepens the illusion. When we say that our eyes respond to visible light, we conveniently skip over the fact that the elementary particles of light, photons, are invisible. A photon has no radiance, luster, color, or any other characteristic we associate with light. Like a Geiger counter that clicks madly in the presence of high levels of radioactivity and emits only a few clicks at low levels, the retina clicks madly when millions of photons trigger the rods and cones that line it, and clicks faintly when light levels are low, which we call darkness. Either way, everything you think you see has been processed inside your brain in a specific region known as the visual cortex, which is totally dark. A flashbulb blinding you in the eye is just as black in the brain as the faintest glimmer of stars at night. Nor do the signals reaching the visual cortex form pictures, much less 3D images. The picture you take to be a snapshot of the world was fabricated by your mind. In the same fashion, the other four senses are just clicks on the surface of other kinds of cells. There is no explanation for why the nerve endings in your nose should turn the bombardment of molecules floating around into the scent of a rose or the stink of a garbage dump. The entire three-dimensional world is based on a magic trick no one can explain. But it is certainly not a true picture of reality. The whole thing is mind-made. A neuroscientist would stop and correct me, claiming that the world we perceive is brain-made instead. A few simple examples disprove this contention, however. As far as your brain is concerned, the letters on this page are black specks, no different from specks you might scatter randomly with flecks of ink off a brush. Before you learned to read the alphabet, letters were only meaningless specks while after you learned to read, they became meaningful. Yet, you had the same brain from 3 years old onward as far as processing information goes. The mind learns to read, not the brain. Likewise, anything you see around you, an elm tree, a Belgian chocolate bar, a church, or a cemetery, acquires meaning because your mind gives it meaning. Another example, when children who were born blind are given sight through medical means, they are baffled by things we take for granted. A cow in the distance looks the same size to them as a cat close up. Stairs look painted on the wall. Their own shadow is a mysterious black patch that insists on following them around. What such children have missed and need to catch up with is the learning curve by which we all learn to shape ordinary reality. So discomforting is the visible world that newly sighted children and adults often prefer to sit in the dark to regain a sense of comfort. The learning curve is necessary to make your way in the world, but you have adapted yourself in strange and unexpected ways. Take perspective. If you're lying in bed and someone touches your shoulder to wake you up, you don't see the person having a very wide body with a small head on top. But take a photo from a position lying in bed and reality is revealed. The person's torso being level with your eyes is unnaturally wide, while the head being further away is unnaturally small. Likewise, when you are talking to someone right next to you, his nose is swollen out of proportion. And if you compare it to a photo, his eyes might be bigger than the hand resting in his lap. We automatically block out how things really look in perspective, and through an act of mind, we adjust the data. The data reaching your eye reports that the room you're sitting in has walls that converge closer together at the far end, but you know that the room is square, so you adjust the data accordingly. You know that a nose is smaller than a hand, requiring a similar adjustment. What causes real shock is that everything you perceive is adjusted. Floating molecules in the garden are adjusted into fragrances. Vibrating airwaves are adjusted into sounds you recognize and identify. There is no escaping that we live in a mind-made world. This is both the glory and the peril of being human. Walking the streets of London 200 years ago, the visionary poet William Blake lamented over what he saw. I mark in every face I meet marks of weakness, marks of woe. In every cry of every man, in every infant's cry of fear, in every voice, in every band, the mind-forged manacles I hear. It's a woeful picture, still being repeated today. Humans have wandered into every kind of suffering and hardship out of a deep-seated belief that we are destined to lead such an experience. There is no alternative until you accept that what the mind has made, it can unmake. There is no alternative until you accept that what the mind has made, it can unmade. There is no alternative until you hit that subscribe button and stay along for further readings of Deepak Chopra's METAHUMAN.
Namaste, Namaskaram.